hear anything. And finally we're here. After lots of techie issues.
Sorry to keep you waiting, peeps.
We're newbies to this. We've been doing it for, well, we've only been doing it for 12 years. But not really to this to this intensity. So
well, hang on, yeah. We're trying to restream to multiple.
Restreaming is what it's all about these days. Yeah.
And unfortunately, every time, the first time you use the, what are they called? Scotty, you've watched Ghostbusters. What are the weapons called?
Yeah, backpacks, whatever.
The proton packs or something like that. I don't know.
We got the streams crossed.
You don't cross the streams.
Yeah.
Never cross the streams. Anyway.
Which caused a kaput, but I think, yes.
It causes the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
I see people commenting. They're watching. You can hear. Can everyone hear us okay? Because that was a secondary effect of trying to get this set up. We lost our own sound. Okay.
Aren't we soon meant to be all living in virtual reality in meta?
We are so not ready for that.
But I don't think the tech is ready for it either, really. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's this hard to kind of get it all working together,
yes, sound is good.
Okay, sounds good. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, a lot of stuff happening.
Yeah. Imminent invasions.
Well, it's not just imminent anymore. Throw up that link there, Scotty, if you've got a second. It's not just imminent anymore. You may have heard the imminent thing before. It's no longer imminent. It's actually
Collapsed away.
very, very likely and very, very imminent.
Oh.
And that's according to some English politician dude.
Well, that's an improvement. You were complaining in the last show that, I keep seeing the same headline over and over again. U.S. government says, UK government says war is imminent. But that is, I like it.
Yeah. Go to
Four varies.
Go to CNN.com there, Scotty, just so we know this isn't fake news from Sky News. Can you go to CNN.com yourself? Can you just type it in?
Oh, yes.
They've changed it. We believe Putin has made a decision to invade Ukraine, according to Putin, but now it's Russia playbook for an invasion is moving forward.
The playbook.
The playbook, the Kremlin playbook.
Is that like playtime for kids?
Yeah. Playtime in the Kremlin for dictators, for literally Hitler.
The playbook. That's supposed to mean something. What does he think? What does it mean to him?
A playbook. Well, there's a document called the Russian Playbook that gives an outline of how Russia
Plays.
Well, it's geopolitics basically.
Oh.
The Russian playbook is a big thing in Washington circles.
Yeah,
Is this the Russian playbook? Do you think this is Russian playbook? Yes, I think this is definitely the Russian playbook.
And imminent, of course.
Well, everything's imminent in the Russian playbook when you want it to be. But it's imminent because today is the end of the Beijing Olympics, and it's time for a war. Whenever Xi has finished with his fun in the snow,
Playing.
yeah, Russia agreed that they wouldn't do anything until then. So obviously today or tomorrow, let's say sometime between today and tomorrow, is definitely really, really for sure, for absolute reals this time, is going to be the Russian invasion. It's happening. But what will actually happen would be, if anything happens, as I mentioned previously, it'll be a Ukrainian invasion of Donbass, Donetsk and Luhansk, to try and take back those two regions. That's obviously what's going to happen. Russia has been very clear and made it very clear by their lack of action that they had no intention of invading Ukraine ever, despite this incessant, nauseatingly incessant. I literally barfed multiple times over the past 6 weeks watching the news, just from the nauseatingly repetitive and bullshitty nature of the headlines. How many times can they say Russia's going to invade? We have intel. Intel says Russia's going to invade. Intel today. It's any time now. It's one of these days. They've literally been doing that for 2 months, 8 weeks incessantly.
Yeah.
And they have no shame about it.
And when February 15th came and went, then they said tomorrow, 16th.
Yeah.
And then they said 20th, which is today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So, where is it?
Let's see the invasion.
Now, the Olympics thing, that's really creepy. Because they've been saying that for weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, he's going to use the Olympics. Well, I'm not sure why, but whatever. He's going to use the Olympics. He'll time it with the Olympics, presumably because
He doesn't want
the
to piss off
people's
Xi.
world's attention will all be focused on the Olympics so he can sneak in a war,
I
right?
don't think there's been much in the way of world attention focused on the Winter Olympics.
It was a big part of the countering the Russian playbook narrative, which was that the Olympics are coming, therefore. What was the therefore for them?
No, therefore was that Xi didn't want him to mess up the Olympics. Don't be having a nasty war in the middle of my Olympics.
That wasn't
'Cause
what I
they're
was
friends.
hearing. I'll look for like a few weeks old report, and it was something like
Like what?
Putin would use the Olympics, like sometime during the duration of them,
No.
to invade Ukraine.
Well, maybe, but there was definitely the idea that it wouldn't happen before the end of the Olympics. There was one idea that it wouldn't
Okay.
happen before the end of the Olympics because
It would
Xi
mess
is
up.
his friend, and you don't want to mess up your friend's party by distracting and having a war while your friend's having a snow party, right? So,
Okay, Associated Press, February 11th. Russia could again invade Ukraine during Olympics, Blinken says.
yeah. During, before, after.
Let's see if he fleshed that out. Why he thinks that. We're in a window when an invasion could begin. Yeah. The Olympic Games end today, February 20th. Therefore, that's deadline day. So the Western narrative was that it has to be by the end of them. You know what I mean? That's, I'm not... You have a good point. You have a good point. If you were a strategist, you would not want to mess up
No, that was said though.
on Beijing.
That was said specifically that there was an agreement between Russia and China that Putin wouldn't. Of course, the Chinese that claim was made, and the Chinese actually said that that's nonsense. That they never made any request to the Russians not to do anything. It's a silly statement. This is all bullshit. I wouldn't try and analyze too much bullshit coming from the Western media over the past 8 weeks, because we know it's all been mostly bullshit, right? In terms of the propaganda, right?
We know our history, so we know what's really going on here. The fact of the matter is, during 2 Olympics, while Putin has been in power, stunts have been pulled against Russia. 2008 Olympics, Putin is sitting down with, I don't know who the leader of the Chinese Communist Party was then, sitting down with him as a guest of honor at the opening ceremony of the Beijing Olympics, which was the Summer Olympics, in early August 2008. When he gets the news, as he's sitting there watching the opening ceremony, that Georgia has attacked Russian territory, or the breakaway territory, I'm not sure. Shells also flew into Russia proper, sparking the Russia-Georgia War of 2008. So that's not Putin taking advantage of Olympics to do stuff. The second instance, of course, is the Winter Olympics held in Sochi in Russia, during which, and the build-up to which, is the massive firestorm that was started in Kiev.
Right.
So it's like barely coming to an end. I presume the Winter Olympics in Sochi were held at the same time through February. And it's February 22nd, 2014, that the snipers opened fire from rooftops against the demonstrators / Yuki hardcore activists, firebombing police down the streets, and Yanukovych flees the country, February 22nd. So who used the Olympics?
Yeah. But that's projection, right?
Pure projection.
So that's where you're getting it. That's what they're getting it from, basically. They think, it's all projection, because they're living in their little subjective bubbles, and they can't see outside.
I know, they're mental though. The Russian playbook. No, it's your playbook, motherfucker. It's yours.
But that's the one thing that defines all of this, is massive projection. You know what I mean? And as defined America, certainly in the last, 20 years, everything has been about projecting, threats abroad, and all to justify to get what they want. That's what projection is about, right?
Yeah, intentions. He's going to do a false flag. He's going to choose this date.
Right. Yeah. But
it is hot over there. Yeah, it's hot.
Yeah. So the situation right now is that, and one thing you see is that there's lots and lots. We've been inundated with maps, with lots of arrows of Russian military forces on Ukrainian borders, and what they would likely do in Ukraine. So lots of arrows in here, and projections, and all sorts of stuff coming from who knows where. I mean, these people are obviously getting it. I mean, in the media, they're getting it from someone, because they themselves have no idea about military strategy. So someone's providing them with the likely military, strategy of what Russia's going to do in Ukraine and stuff. But one thing that's missing in all of that I haven't really seen, and you really have to dig for it, is the thing that's far more likely to happen, and that would be far more instructive, is maps of how many, or maps of details about how many Ukrainian forces are on the border of the Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics, self-declared, and what the likely, invasion from that side is going to be, or what form it would take, because that's the most likely thing to happen. That's going to be the first. If there's going to be anything, that'll be the first salvo, basically. Will be from the Ukrainian side into Donbass and Luhansk. Because Russia has pissed off America over the past several months by not doing anything. No matter how much they've been provoked, no matter how much they've been told that this is what you're going to do, they have not done it, and they've instead publicly said, no, we're not going to do that, and we keep saying we're not going to do that. And that really pisses America off. So the only way that they can get Russia to do anything is by taking preemptive action against ethnic Russians in Donbass and in Donbass. So that's the most likely thing to happen. And I mean, all the talk we talked about last week about the maybe a couple of weeks ago, I don't know, about this, the Pentagon spokesman talking about a false flag attack and Russia's planning false flag attacks, blah, 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 blah. Well, this week, I mean, there has been an uptick over the past week or so in shelling, mortars, etc., fired from Ukraine into Donbass, targeting different places, but also allegations of them, and they probably have been shooting back from.
They've been firing back at positions they're coming from, yeah.
From Donbass. But there was a claim this week. It didn't get a lot of attention, but it was straight out of the American playbook, or the Western playbook, against any of their enemies, which is to highlight some kind of an atrocity in a certain sense, And in this case, there's nothing better in that respect than if children are in some way or other attacked or threatened. Now, there was a claim in the Western media about a nursery school.
Taking a direct hit.
Yeah. Let me just see if I can find it, because I didn't actually... Okay, so there's not many actual... Okay, there's one from ABC News. It's kind of interesting, because it just... That kind of thing jumps out at me, because it's so manipulative. That's it. That's from ABC News. There wasn't much. I mean, a lot of them reported it in their headlines on the ongoing situation. But this is one from 17th February, so 3 days ago. Tensions rise in Ukraine as Russian-backed separatist shelling hits nursery school. Now, you'd look at that and think to yourself, wow, that's bad, If you scroll down, you can try and find an image. There is maybe one of patrols the damaged building. This guy. Keep down a little bit. Yeah, that's not very instructive, but the next one is this guy supposedly. Oh, look, there's some paintings on the wall and stuff. So, and it supposedly patrols the damaged building of a local school located near the line of separation from the Ukrainian armed forces in the Luhansk region. So, but luckily there was an actual video, because in any good false flag operation you want to have some proper video. So it's following the American playbook and the way that that Pentagon spokesperson detailed. You have to have video and stuff of the atrocity. Now, this is obviously low level, but do you have the video I sent a couple of days ago there, Scotty? Or do you need me to send it again?
I do.
US built up. So we'll just have a look at this. And this is actual video of... Can you make it bigger? And stop it. Go back to the start, yeah. So this is a video of the alleged shelling by Luhansk or Donbass separatists, let's say, of a nursery school in Ukraine, not far over the border.
It was in Ukraine, that is.
In Ukraine proper, yeah, but obviously...
Kiev occupied Ukraine.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Don't know what else to call.
Anyway, so here's a video. Ukraine's military has accused Russian-backed forces of firing shells at a village in the Luhansk region and hitting a nursery school, whatever. So here's the image. Here's the image they presented to verify or to back up their claim that the evil Putin-backed separatists in eastern Ukraine have been attacking nursery schools in Ukraine. Nobody was injured, so that's all good. But the video is interesting, just in terms of whether or not it actually validates the claim. So just play it there, and I'll ask you to stop it, actually. So there's a hole in the wall. Look around. Everything looks pretty nice. Just stop there. There's the hole that the shell, quote unquote, supposedly came through. Wallpaper looks pretty good, if that's wallpaper, or painting. Painting looks pretty good. Even the bookshelf under the thing, it's just got some bricks on it. There's some footballs there. I think one or two of the little footballs that were on those shelves got knocked off by the violent explosion.
The windows, Joe. What's going on with
and keep going, yeah. Just play some more. Windows look fine. Doors look fine. Wall, everything looks fine. Windows, yeah, fine. No shattered windows. And this is outside. Just pause it there, for example.
But those windows should be shattered.
Window right beside it, fine. I mean, I've done some construction, and what that looks like is someone took a pickaxe and took off the outside cladding or whatever it is, plaster, basically. It looks like mud, kind of like a mud plaster on the outside of the bricks, knocked it off with a pickaxe. That's the kind of rubble you'd expect. Then someone took a sledgehammer and knocked out 10 rows of bricks. And then if you just jump back to the inside again, because that doesn't show any more of the inside, and then the inside of is there's, okay, go back a little bit more. The interesting thing is those bricks as well, is that those are like, look like new cinder blocks, you know? They're grey, and someone broke them up and kind of scattered them in a line in front of the hole. But if you just jump forward again and look at the outside, the bricks on the outside, those aren't cinder blocks, right? They look like older, it's probably an older building. A lot of buildings in Ukraine are old. Those aren't cinder blocks. They're they look almost like they could be mud bricks, or
Clay
half
bricks,
and half, or at
maybe.
least just clay bricks, right?
With fiberglass insulation.
Yeah. So there's none of the brown material inside the building. It's all broken up
Outside.
Inside the building. None of that brown material on the outside.
So it's ejected outwards.
It's inside. Somehow
Yeah.
it was knocked off. The only conclusion is it was knocked off the wall. All of that was deliberately just knocked off the wall. And then the bricks inside were either, maybe they used the bricks, maybe they were cinder blocks, whatever, but somebody scattered them in front because there's no damage inside. Obviously, the only conclusion here is that some kind of a shell, and a very strange shell, because the shells are firing are mortars, which are pretty much ballistic.
Yeah.
They don't have any guiding. They're not flying horizontally. They're
Up
flying
and
up
down.
and down in an arc and landing and exploding. So, and also other people took videos of this area, and in the opposite direction of where that something supposedly went through that wall, there are plenty of buildings, right? So there's no way for any kind of a guided missile to have, unless it was a super fancy, Tomahawk cruise missile that has GPS and stuff and can avoid building stuff. But there's basically a lot of buildings around there. And anyway, that damage isn't consistent with the things that are being fired, which are mortars, which go up and
down.
land down on the ground. It doesn't penetrate sideways, and the pattern of debris inside would suggest that something, they're trying to make it look, you'd have to conclude that it was some kind of a missile that went through the wall vertically and then spread the debris inside, but not the kind of debris that is on the outside of the building for some reason. Just some relatively new looking, as you can see there.
But if it came through the wall over here, right?
Yeah.
It kind of is like a projectile. Shouldn't, like, on this wall over here? Don't munitions usually like explode?
Not in Ukraine, no.
Shouldn't there be like some?
No.
I mean, the wallpaper is immaculate.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe it was one of those
That's
special evil Russian missiles or something.
Yeah, maybe.
Who
yeah,
knows?
Yeah.
Guys, these are Russians we're
But
talking
this was
about.
portrayed as, and again, it's for the propaganda effect. It's like, evil Russian-backed Ukrainian separatists attacked a nursery school. It looks very much anybody with any sense, I think, or with any modicum of perspicacity would look at that situation and say, look, the outside of that building. You could probably see, if you had better video and looked up close, you'd probably see pickaxe marks in that kind of cladding on the outside of the building where someone just ripped it off, then knocked out with a sledgehammer a hole in the wall and said, there's your explosion, there's your attack on a nursery school. Anyway, so that was the closest we got to a false flag attack, and it actually is, at least in the way it was reported, that is a false flag attack, but by the
amazing thing is,
by the West, basically.
I
by
first
the
learned
US and its friends.
about that incident in the British Telegraph with the headline, Putin claims false flag attack in eastern Ukraine. So my first learning of it wasn't that this had happened. It was that Russia had made an official claim about this incident. Russia made no such claim. They learned about it the same way. You know what I mean? They kind of jumped the gun and went false flag. But without actually going through the steps of letting this go out and percolate, then Russia making its claim.
Who
Then the
said it was a
West-
false flag?
The British Telegraph.
Said that this was a false flag.
Yeah, this was a false flag. That Putin's calling this a false flag was a false flag.
I'm getting confused, Turner. I'm sorry. You're going double reverse psychology. I'm sorry.
I'll have to look for it.
Anyway, yeah. So it's all. Is it all going to kick off? I don't know if it's going to kick off or not. Anyway, not a lot of people know anything about the history of all of this. Like, let's just throw up. Let's throw up invasion.jpg, Scotty, just to give some context. To kick off the context, a nice little list there of bit of history in case anybody thinks that this is something new. From 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2021. We got a break in 2020 because of COVID, I think. But right up until November 2021. Check out those headlines. Russia is massing thousands of troops on Ukraine's border. What's Putin up to? The Russian military buildup in Europe. Ukraine asserts major Russian military buildup on eastern Ukraine. Almost 100,000 Russian troops poised for, guess what? That was January 2019. What is that? More than 3 years ago. April 2021. After months of simmering conflict, thousands of Russian... You know what comes next. Then November, that's just a few months ago, Russia has 90,000 troops. So this isn't anything new, just in case you thought it was. But obviously, something has changed on this iteration of the whole round of bullshit, which is that it's been massive. The media is saturated with these stories, whereas going back more than 5 years on a kind of yearly basis, or sometimes more than once a year, the media reported pretty much exactly the same headlines that you've been seeing over and over again for the past 8 weeks, except they were just reported once or twice in a few outlets, and that's it, and no one paid any attention. And of course, you didn't have government leaders all, hysterically flapping about the whole thing, having meetings, wondering what they're going to do, sending weapons, all that kind of stuff. So obviously they've turned the temperature way up on it this time. And it all, as we're saying, it's all leading up to the only thing that would make any difference this time is if the US and its allies, in partnership with the quisling state of Ukraine and the quisling government of Ukraine, have decided that they're going to actually attack Donbass, attack the ethnic Russians in Donbass. That's the only possible difference that'll make this one different from all the previous flaps about this. And of course, then if that happens, then you get a response from Russia to some extent, and then anything that can justify sanctions, anything that would be a check mark approval for sanctions, bad enough action by Russia in order to approve sanctions against Russia and see where that goes.
I found the British government claim about the kindergarten incident. Put this up, Scotty. It was reported everywhere. Boris Johnson, Ukraine kindergarten shelling is false flag operation.
Prime Minister, a separatist attack in East is spurious provocation for Russian action. How does that work? Boris Johnson has claimed the shelling of a nursery school in the Donbass region of Ukraine by Russian-backed separatists was but he's getting that wrong. This was in Ukraine. I just showed you a headline there before we saw the video that it's Russian-backed separatists in Donbass were accused of shelling an area that included that damage to a nursery school in Ukraine. These were Ukrainian, loyal Western Ukrainian nursery school children who were put in danger. Where's he getting that from?
I'm not sure, but my only guess would that be, it names a city there. The city of Stanitsia Luhanska is in Kiev occupied part of Luhansk.
Right.
So when he says the Donbass, informally the region of Donbass is larger than the part that's retained by the...
Yeah.
So when that could be accurate, he says it took place in the Donbass, but on the Kiev side, the Kiev occupied side.
No, but he says the shelling of the nursery school in Donbass region of Ukraine by Russian-backed separatists. This is territory. This happened in territory held by the Ukrainian military.
Yeah, and he's implying that it was fired over into Ukrainian-held territory by the separatists, hit the school, and then he jumps the gun. That's what I was trying to say. He jumped the gun by saying it's a false flag operation.
Mm-hmm.
It is probably a false flag operation, but in the reverse direction. You see, the Ukis did that, got media attention. Look, they're shelling us. In fact, they're targeting our children. And Boris is like,
how does that? Yeah, but how does it? That's justification for Ukraine to do something against the separatists, not the opposite way around.
mm-hmm.
So how can it be? How can it favor? Aimed at discrediting the Ukrainian government? It doesn't discredit the Ukrainian government. If a nursery school in territory held by the Ukrainian government is attacked by Russian-backed separatists, it doesn't discredit the Ukrainian government. It discredits the separatists who fired the mortar. Right?
Right. Yes.
And we saw that in the headline. That's what they were accused. Most of the other headlines about this are accusing the Russian-backed separatists of attacking a nursery school in Ukraine.
Yes.
So, how is it a false flag? Does he mean it didn't happen? But then you're looking at a gift horse in the mouth. That's an opportunity for you to say, look at these evil Russian-backed separatists, what they did to a nursery school. Is Boris just like being dopey Boris or something, or are they being hoisted on? Are they getting?
It was reported all over the place. This was not a one-off report, huh? It was a blitz. That's why I'm telling you. The first thing I heard about an incident was the West accused Russia of a false flag operation, quote, designed to discredit the Ukrainians, designed to create a pretext, a spurious provocation for Russian action. Here's what I'm thinking. It is double reverse psychology. They're going to, some atrocity is going to happen. Maybe this wasn't it, but some atrocity is going to happen. Then the Russians will say, okay, that's gone too far. We need to physically stop this. And then the West will get to say, there, you see, he's created a false pretext for the military action he always wanted to take.
Yeah. Well, yeah, of course, yeah, but that's the standard.
It's just,
Okay.
I think they're going mad. I think
No,
we're going
no,
mad trying to figure because they're going nuts.
But I mean, somebody has to. You said, yeah, it was all over the news and stuff, yeah. But all of the news was basically this news. Just throw one up, Scotty. This was the reporting on it. That one that you just put up from wherever is I don't know where the hell it comes from. Shelling by Russian-backed separatists raises tensions in East Ukraine. Scroll down. Tensions in east of Ukraine, i.e. in Ukraine, not in the breakaway republics, have risen dramatically after Russian-backed separatists launched an intense artillery barrage across the line of control with Ukrainian forces, shelling a nursery school and injuring 3 people.
Well, the British Prime Minister called it a false flag operation.
He doesn't. He's like getting tied up in his own
Yes, in
bullshit.
his own
Basically, he has no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
That was an opportunity for him to say, evil Russian-backed separatists attacked a nursery school. Putin must be stopped. Why does he turn around and make it sound like this discredits the Ukrainian government? It discredits the Russian-backed separatists because they're the ones who attacked the nursery school. What are you talking about?
We know Boris hits the bottle a lot after Partygate.
Yeah.
Maybe he was drinking again on the job.
Bizarre.
It's totally fruitcake. It's fruitcake stuff. Look, but anyway, coming back to the playbook, like you said, an atrocity is going to happen one of these days. Sputnik reports yesterday that one of the bridges over which was a huge convoy of refugees being moved from Donbass, women, children, the elderly, into Russia, that they found 2 bombs were planted under the bridge.
Mm-hmm.
According to Donetsk authorities. And that's the kind of thing where, they're going that if and when such a thing happens, that's where they're going to go, right. So the separatists planted the bomb to blow up some of their own people to make it look like we did it, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. So Johnson is just like, that's what I mean. He knows what the playbook is, but the idiot just didn't use it correctly or mistimed
because
it.
it's too confusing even for him, right?
Like he finishes up in that statement. We fear, quote Boris Johnson, we fear very much that this is the kind of thing we will see more of in the next few days.
Right, which would justify.
Something that would justify a Russian, quote, invasion of Ukraine.
That doesn't justify a Russian invasion. Russian-backed separatists attacking a nursery school in Ukraine doesn't justify a Russian invasion. It makes them look bad. It's. Come on, seriously, like Jesus Christ, you know what's going on here? I mean,
what we're dealing
you gotta
with.
keep your bullshit consistent at least. You know what I mean? I mean, when you start twisting your bullshit around to the point where you're actually, you know, you're saying the opposite of what you should be saying in terms of keeping the bullshit consistent. Like Russia's evil. When you start, anyway, I just want to put this up for the picture for Stoltenberg. You know, he's the NATO chief for a while. He's heading off to be I think he's going to be the chairman of the Bank of.
NATO Stan.
No, I can't remember which country. Estonian? Is he Estonian? Don't know. Anyway, or no, Norway. I think Norway. I think he's Norwegian. Is he?
Yes, Prime Minister of Norway twice.
Yeah, I think he's going to be the chairman of the Norwegian Central Bank. Nice cushy job. Look at that face. Just scroll in on his face there. There's the guy who is saying that Russia is planning a full-scale attack. He really has no idea. He doesn't know what's going on. They ask him about false flag attacks, and he'd be like,
Well, he's better than Boris. Come on.
I don't know. I don't like. He's a pencil. Like he's such a little Igor, you know.
Well, I mean, he's better at getting the lie straight.
Yeah.
Boris.
Well.
Boris
The recent actions of Russia are all indications. I can't read this bullshit anymore. Seriously, like I mean, it's all. I've been reading it for 8 weeks. The same stuff over and over again. All signs point to Russia planning a full-scale attack on Ukraine. I mean, the people is nobody else sick of this? They've been saying that repeatedly over and over again for 8 weeks, every single day, multiple times a day. And then you have just go to the other RT article, Scotty. Ukraine makes request to West. This is from 2 days ago, yesterday. There's been some bizarre statements like eking out of the Ukrainian government, and particularly from Zelensky, which suggests that he has no power in that country at all. That there's someone else, some other group within Ukraine, or negotiating directly with or following the orders of the US, or maybe it's CIA operatives basically embedded in the Ukrainian government, kind of like it was in Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. It was basically being run for a while by State Department officials. That's what's happening in Ukraine right now. But the odd time you get these statements from, you know, the official representatives of the Ukrainian government that, you know, certainly far more reasonable than the kind of stuff you're getting from the Pentagon or Joe Biden or any of their European allies. But here he says, if the West really wants to help Kiev in its standoff with Moscow, it should refrain from guessing when or if Russia's armed forces could begin pouring over the border to wage war against the country, Zelensky said. He said, to help Ukraine, there is no need to constantly talk about possible invasion dates. We're initiating consultations within the framework of the Budapest Memorandum.
Right. Interesting.
And
he cites that.
Yeah.
Because no American has cited that.
No.
Which was an agreement between Washington and Moscow in the 90s that they would not interfere in the politics of Ukraine, Belarus, and a third ex-Soviet republic. Can't remember where. Poland, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah. So the history of all this it's probably useful to understand the history of this.
Wait, before we go any more history, can I give some more updates on what is and is not going on in the region? Because there's just a ton of horseshit coming out of Western media. Okay, so these are facts. I think there's no better authority, I think, to ask than the OSCE, Organization for the Security and Cooperation in Europe, which was, of course, created to try and bridge some kind of a forum between NATO stand West and Russia. It incorporates Russia, the former Soviet republics. It's basically Eurasia plus the United States.
But it was also
the US isn't in it.
It was also increased security in Europe between European countries. You know, part of the, in terms of unifying Europe. But go ahead.
They say on February 16th alone, so that's 4 days ago now, there were 189 ceasefire violations in the Donetsk part of the breakaway region, and 402, so that's over 500 together in the Luhansk part.
Mm-hmm.
They don't say who's doing it, but most of it, I'm sure, is instigated. It has been. There's a pattern going back years from Ukraine proper into Donbass region. Of those, 2 shells have so far, at least 2, have landed in Russia proper.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that gives us casus belli, cause for war, that any Western country would have jumped on all over by now. But of course, Russia is like, well, it's 2 stray shells. No one was hurt. We'll just absorb those 2.
And it's a provocation. And,
Yeah.
and Russia is not taking the provocations.
At least 3 international TV crews have come under fire.
Mm-hmm.
That's not indiscriminate. That's targeted. We know for sure, again, according to OSCE, that the Ukrainians are using drones, types of drones which are prohibited, actually, according to the Minsk agreements, to calibrate their fire. They see positions of anything they want to target. For terrorism purposes or to actually take it out, they recalibrate. And 3 TV crews, RT, Sputnik. The RT one was an Arabic reporter. There was RT Arabic, not RT Russian.
Mm-hmm.
And then a local TV crew as well from the Donbass. We were talking about maps earlier. Pepe Escobar reports that the rebels claim to have intercepted a Ukrainian plan.
Mm-hmm.
And that the plan is to cleanse the region ethnically of Russians. Probably not an understatement, at least from the point of view of the kind of Nazi elements here. Let's have a look at this map. I don't know how legit it is. It apparently shows positions of Ukrainian forces along the contact line. Can you maybe zoom that in a bit if you can? It probably will be blurry. No, maybe not. Yeah, that looks, well, it's in Russian.
So it must be legit.
No, that's not enough, eh? But
Well,
this is the invasion map.
Yeah.
The world should have been shown.
yeah.
Okay, we're talking 150,000, give or take. Everyone agrees that that's a rough number. Ukrainian forces ranged against these rebels, who are only about a third of that number, and probably less in terms of ratio of materiel, tanks, howitzers, anti-aircraft, freaking shoulder help, man pads, all the stuff that have been pumped into Ukraine in the last few years, especially in the last few weeks. Thousands of tons of weapons. And they all went straight to that line. It is indeed gearing up to be a slaughter. It is indeed gearing up to be
The invasion is
an
imminent.
invasion force, and it's a Western-backed and probably directed invasion of the breakaway part of Ukraine that wants to be part of Russia. So that's your invasion map. All these other ones with arrows from Russia into Ukraine, none of them ever actually got hard intel. No Russian stuff was leaked. For sure, there's Russian forces ranged all around Ukraine. Of course there are, because it shares borders between Belarus and Russia. There's massive borders. Of course there's Russian troops. But it's in their country, as they keep saying.
Mm-hmm.
This military line up here is in flagrant breach of Minsk Accords. They're firing in already. The Russians, I mean, that's the other big development, I suppose, that makes this hot situation. They've started to ship in massive convoys. They claim over 30,000 people so far have been bussed out of Donbass into Russia. And they have sent down emergency funds, shelter, food for up to 700,000 people
Yeah.
inside Russia.
There's 4 million people in between Luhansk and Donetsk. Those two republics.
Is that the total for both?
4
Or
million.
just for the breakaway portions? Because it's not even half of Luhansk. It's like
Yeah.
small. It's a third of it, I think.
No, but for the self-declared Luhansk and
There's 4 million
Donetsk
remaining in there.
People's Republics, there's 4 million people in terms of population. Yeah.
And 2 million already left between 2014 and now into
Mm-hmm.
Russia. Russia has a lot of refugees from this region. There's probably other development, but another big one is that a gas company blew up in Luhansk, in the rebel-held part of Luhansk.
Mhm.
They suspect sabotage. They didn't suggest that it was missile attacked or anything. That's part of the issue here. The Ukrainian Kiev government forces have a lot of inroads into this region. It's in no way like a properly manned border or properly surveilled border. They always have. Shortly after 2014, SBU, the Kiev intelligence services, undoubtedly with a lot of techie help from Langley, successfully car bombed, assassinated the leaders of the movement, the military leaders, and then their political leader, Zakharova or something his name was. That guy was killed. Later on, I think in 2016, he was assassinated in a restaurant that had been jerry-rigged, loaded with bombs. They obliterated the place. I think 10 people were killed in it. There was another car bomb 3 days ago that targeted, it was definitely his car, but he wasn't in it at the time, the head of police for the breakaway regions. So
Just go to the Twitter, just talking about the kind of mentality behind, go to the Twitter link, Max Blumenthal's, actually. It's play that video. It's Ukrainian armed forces reportedly flew the flag of the German Third Reich from their position in the Donbass, according to surveillance footage from militias on the pro-Russian side. Now, I mean, all that stuff is. Did you play it? No. Just a video of the swastika flag. That I mean, yeah. You talk about Nazis and everybody being called Nazis in Western countries, you know, and especially in the US, all the allegations of fascism and Nazism, and here's the US. And if you just scroll up on that one, can you scroll up on that?
the Ukis actually put
thread?
Wehrmacht insignia
Yeah.
on their drones.
Right. And this is apparently the US Embassy attaché Colonel Brittany Stewart was paying tribute to Ukrainian ultra-right neo-fascist right sector leader Vasily Slipak. And if you just click on that one on the right there where the arrow is, it just shows the kind of death's head. That's their kind of emblem, Ukraine or death badge. And so, yeah, they're all lovely people, but
If look at this, if Russia does not do anything to help them, they're going to be slaughtered, ethnically cleansed. I'm talking like
well, there's
the Kosovo Albanians squared,
yeah, there's a risk of
Srebrenica
that,
squared.
Yeah.
Do you see the bind they put Putin in? He has to do something,
Yeah.
assuming they, you know, do the full invasion. They actually make use of all those weapons and troops lined up there.
Yeah. Yeah.
He will have no choice.
Yeah. They want sanctions, yeah, for sure. And it's all for the goal of imposing sanctions on Russia in order to.
Top of the Telegraph right now. Telegraph.co.uk. Russia-Ukraine crisis. West urged to impose sanctions now as Russian invasion threat escalates. Just do it. Just do it.
Yeah, yeah, they're desperate for it. It's so obvious that that's. No.
I've got to say, Putin is very cool so far from what I'm hearing. He was with Lukashenko of Belarus. Mind you, he said this while he was conducting nuclear strategic exercises, which involved all of Russia's big guns yesterday. They fired some of their new hypersonic missiles, the Kinzhal, the Zircon. They did an ICBM test, like from Yars all the way to Kamchatka, submarine salvos, caliber missiles from the Caspian Sea. They did the full suite, and he did it in his situation room with Lukashenko by his side. But the only thing he said was a calm, I'll read it. The guarantee that peace can be restored comes with the implementation of the Minsk agreements. All Kiev needs to do is sit down at the negotiating table with representatives of the Donbass and agree on political, military, economic, and humanitarian measures to end this conflict. The sooner this happens, the better. So that's the same thing he's been saying since 2015.
Yeah. Yeah. So just to go over a bit of history on this. People know most of this already, I assume, but there may be some details that are just that are important to understand in terms of how we got to where we are today. So Soviet Union falls, 1990, 1991, whatever. NATO had been set up after the Second World War in order as effectively a vehicle, a Cold War vehicle to contain, as we talked about in previous shows, contain the Soviet Union, contain communism, whatever.
Which had not yet formed a Warsaw Pact. That came 5 years later.
Right. So they spent all these years, NATO spends all these years, pushing back, organizing with its European allies to push back against communism, let's say, in the Soviet Union, and have a kind of detente. And then the Soviet Union falls. What's the point of NATO? For a while, the Americans are under the impression that, that's the end of, well, obviously it's the end of the Soviet Union, and it's what's Russia going to turn into? Well, we talked again in previous shows about this, about how, the US did its best at the time to kind of hobble the new Russian Federation and turn it into a kind of like, force it to take its place among the lower downs in the global order, because America even then saw itself as the exceptional nation, and that, at least, had the idea that it was an exceptional nation and the leader of the free world, all those good things. So but it was interesting that in those years of the 90s, after the fall of the Soviet Union and leading up to 9/11, you had the rise of neocons in the US, Wolfowitz, Pearl, Rumsfeld, Cheney, amongst them, all that kind of stuff. And there was, at the time, I think it was 1994, there was a document leaked to the New York Times, actually 1992, a document leaked to the New York Times, and it was called the Wolfowitz Doctrine. Its sponsor being Paul Wolfowitz, a kind of arch neocon. Many of those neocons actually at the time were actually Jewish, which means that it had a definite Israeli angle to it. But anyway, I'll just read from the Wikipedia page here because it gives a brief description. The Wolfowitz Doctrine is an unofficial name given to the initial version of a defense planning guidance for the 1994 to 1999 fiscal years, published by U.S. Undersecretary of Defense at the time, Paul Wolfowitz, and his deputy, Scooter Libby. It was not intended for public release. It was leaked to the New York Times in 1992 and sparked a public controversy about U.S. foreign policy and defense policy. The document was widely criticized as imperialist, as the document outlined a policy of unilateralism and preemptive military action to suppress potential threats from other nations and prevent dictatorships from rising to superpower status. Such was the outcry that the document was hastily rewritten under the close supervision of U.S. Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff Colin Powell, before being officially released on April 16, 1992. Many of its tenets re-emerged in the Bush Doctrine, which was described by Senator Edward Kennedy as a call for 21st century American imperialism that no other nation can or should accept. So basically, the Wolfowitz Doctrine, which then became the Bush Doctrine, was, in short, a policy where America embraced the idea that it was the world's only hegemon, the world's only superpower, and it would not tolerate a challenge from any other country in the world. And that wasn't just a statement of, but it was a statement of intent and policies and militarization and geopolitical strategy and geopolitical moves were made fully based on that policy. So you can have a think yourself about everything that happened since then, including maybe most pointedly 9/11 and everything that was justified on the basis of 9/11. But at that time, Russia had done nothing. So Russia is still getting itself together. Putin comes to power in 2000 in the new Russian Federation. And this policy is in place. It's in place very much with a view to Russia. Even though Russia is no longer the Soviet Union, Russia is still obviously at this point deemed to be a potential threat. But they can't do much about. They haven't been able to subvert Russia from the inside or whatever and turn it into a kind of vassal state. So they just have to, especially after Putin comes along, they just have to suck it up. But even from when Putin came to power in 2000, 1999, 2000, the years before that, since the fall of the Soviet Union, and after that, for the next 7-8 years, Russia did nothing to justify any antagonism by the US towards it. Did nothing on the international stage. There was nothing that the US could have been in any way annoyed, vexed, perturbed
some
about.
examples.
Nothing open. What, like what?
It's long forgotten now, but Putin organized a meeting with Chirac and Schroeder in which they issued a joint press statement, and they said they disagreed with invading Iraq.
Yeah. Well,
So I'm just saying there was nothing.
but no, but
there's
nothing
physically.
to single Russia out
Yeah.
in the way that it has been since then, on at the time, and to develop the policies of the attitude towards Russia then that have kind of come to fruition over the past 10 or 15 years. Russia had done nothing. When you said it was done with Chirac and Schroeder, with France and Germany, why didn't they attack France and Germany in the same way? I mean, they came up with all sorts of freedom fries and cheese-eating surrender monkeys and stuff because of that 2003 thing, but that wasn't something to single Russia out. So Russia had done nothing, had shown no intention of. In doing that, it was what you described. It was just simply agreeing with Russia, with France and Germany on the Iraq War, and a lot of people. So it's not something that you're going to get so worked up about. So my point about this is they had done nothing overtly to justify the policies that they implemented, that the US implemented, antagonistic towards Russia. So it obviously has some other reason. There's some other reason behind it that they couldn't speak about because it's not justified.
I hear you.
And in 2000, the first thing Putin actually did was ask to join NATO.
Yeah.
And they said, nah, you're too big.
Oh, it's even more interesting that Bill Clinton, who was still president, he was in his last year, said, that sounds definitely, we'll put that on the next agenda, no problem. His advisors went quiet, and a letter was written around the back door as Air Force One flew home to Washington and said, never going to happen.
Right, exactly, yeah, it's not happening.
Not happening.
So why?
Right.
Why not?
Well,
Because
Putin
NATO was
knew
set up.
why, and it was great because he got them to say it officially on the record. No,
Right.
forget it.
He even asked to join the EU. He wanted Russia to join the European Union.
Yeah.
He says, if you're really interested in security in Europe, there's a big part of Russia that's part of Europe. And they said, again, kind of, nah, man, you're too big and you don't really fit here. So preemptively, they excluded Russia. And even at a time where Russia had radically changed and had fallen apart, basically, under the guise as the Soviet Union, and was remaking itself, they had an opportunity then to, and Russia under Putin extended themselves in the year 2000, extended the hand of cooperation or of interest and say, listen, let's all get on
Gave the
together.
US military access so he could fly into Afghanistan.
Exactly. It was the first one, I think, to call Bush after 9/11 and offered any help we can offer, no problem. You want to come into Afghanistan? It's right on our border, right on the former
Built a
borders.
memorial to 9/11 across the waters from the Statue of Liberty.
Right.
Russian state money.
I even said Georgia at the time. You want to station troops in Georgia for your war against terror? We're in the whole. We're fully on board with the whole war on terror thing. Let's work on this together. They went, fuck you. You're the problem. And I mean, that's what Afghanistan was about in a certain sense, I mean, we've argued before that that's what the whole war on terror was about. Because if you look back before the war on terror even started, before bin Laden even came on the scene, these policies, the Wolfowitz Doctrine that became the Bush Doctrine, said America is the hegemon. We look around the world, and anybody who has the potential to challenge us, and most particularly has some kind of an is ideologically different from us, or would not be so easily swayed to fall in line and see itself as a vassal state, effectively, of America. That's the country we have a problem with, and the one that stood out amongst any of them. And in fact, the only one was Putin and Russia. But not just Putin, because within the Russian mentality, there's also the idea that, you talk about Americans having this idea of them being the exceptional nation and having, manifest destiny to rule the world's policeman, the greatest nation, the greatest democracy that ever, shining city on a hill, all that stuff. The Russian people have historically
Similar.
a view of themselves, not as jingoistic and arrogant in a certain sense as it's portrayed in America, but Russians have an idea of themselves as a great nation that has a big part to play in the world, and always has done. And so it's insulting. I mean, the attitude the Americans took towards Russia by diminishing them and refusing them any cooperation insulted not only the Russian elite and political class, but the Russian population who got wind of that,
Yeah.
And you get back to this guy the German guy a few weeks ago who had to resign, the German chief of the Navy, who had to resign because he said in a meeting in India, and it was, recorded, that he said basically what Russia wants is respect. And the implication being we're not giving it to them. We're not giving the respect that they're due.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, we're just antagonizing them, attacking them. We're creating any and all kinds of smear campaigns and black propaganda, and have done for the past 10 or 15 years. I mean, we can cite the, as I've said before, MH17 over Ukraine in 2014. Putin killed my baby, blaming him for shooting down that plane, which was, obviously was, again, okay, we can talk about false flags now, right? Can't we talk officially about false flags now? Would that include, would the Pentagon spokesman description of false flags, where you stage an attack, video it, maybe have even some crisis actors, some dead people, maybe not dead people, whatever. It's a kind of, there's a lot of room for maneuver there in terms of how you set it up. Since he said that's something that's official Pentagon understanding of things that can and do happen or carried out by states, can we put MH17 into that category if it achieves a political objective, which is the whole point of false flag operations, is to achieve a political objective?
Yep. And Salisbury and
Skripal,
Litvinenko, 2006.
Well, there you go. You're going back to 2006.
2006. That's before Putin's Munich speech.
Right. In 2007.
When
yeah.
he was the only one, and you could hear a pin drop in the room. Actually, the Munich conference this year is being held right now.
Right.
And what's his name? Zelensky's out there. Anyway.
Talking about Munich, 2007, that's maybe the point where they really started to, I mean, obviously, like I said, they had already been gunning for Russia before that and had set their targets on them. But by 2007, Putin came out at the Munich Security Conference, came out and made some pointed remarks about NATO at that point. He had seen what had gone on. He had seen how the West and America had agreed that after the fall of the Soviet Union, they'd give Barker at the time, the Secretary of State, had given assurances to Gorbachev, and others had given the same assurances that NATO would not move eastwards and threaten Russia. And they reneged on it. I think it was 2004. Well, I'm not sure the exact date, but Czech Republic, Hungary, Poland.
Well, a bunch in
2004,
97, and then 2004,
97, yeah.
and then a third wave.
Right.
Yeah.
So by that point, the writing was on the wall that this wasn't, that these people in the West, in the US and in NATO were just, they're not going to be our friends. They don't want to be our friends, for no good reason. In 2007, at the Munich Security Conference, Putin said, he noted that NATO had put its frontline forces on our borders, which it had by then, in 7 countries, I think. And he said, we do not react to these actions at all, which is true, they didn't react. He said, I think it's obvious that NATO expansion does not have any relation with the modernization of the alliance itself or with ensuring security in Europe. Because that was the justification at the time, that they were modernizing it after the Cold War, after the fall of the Soviet Union, that NATO had to retool itself, and it was now about it was modernizing, and its whole point was just security in Europe.
And
right?
then it changed.
Amongst European countries, right? It was just to keep Europe knitted together,
For
right?
several years, it was upgraded. Before the first JCPOA agreement was signed with Iran, officially, NATO missiles were stationed in Eastern Europe to provide an umbrella against air attack by Iran against Europe.
Right,
and when
supposedly.
Putin was asked this by a German journalist, he just laughed in his face.
Yeah.
You know?
He goes on to say, on the contrary, NATO represents a serious provocation that reduces the level of mutual trust, and we have the right to ask, against whom is this expansion intended? Of course, the narrative at the time, like you just said, was, oh, that's for Iran. And he said, what happened to the assurances our Western partners made after the dissolution of the Warsaw Pact? That was after the fall of the Soviet Union. Where are those declarations today? No one even remembers them. But I will allow myself to remind this audience, and he's speaking here to the great and the good and, the international community, i.e. the West, Western Europe and America. I will allow myself to remind this audience what was said. I would like to quote the speech of NATO Secretary General Secretary Mr. Werner in Brussels on the 17th of May 1990. He said at that time, "The fact that we are ready not to place a NATO army outside of German territory gives the Soviet Union a firm security guarantee." So, at the time, we're not going to put any forces outside of our country, i.e. eastwards. And Putin says, where are these guarantees? And interestingly, earlier the following year, 2008, a US cable that was released by WikiLeaks detailed Moscow's continuing concerns. So the US was totally aware of what effect this was having on Russia, how it was. They don't go as far as to say that it was unjustified or they were being evil. They weren't like kind of rubbing their hands together and saying, "Wahaha, now we have them," but it's more or less there. They say, Ukraine and Georgia's NATO aspirations not only touch a raw nerve in Russia, they engender serious concerns about the consequences for stability in the region. Not only does Russia perceive encirclement and efforts to undermine its influence in the region, but it also fears unpredictable and uncontrolled consequences which would seriously affect Russian security interests. But we don't care. We're going to do it anyway. In fact, good. We're glad to see that they're concerned about what we're doing because we want them to be concerned. Why? At that point, Russia had done nothing. Russia was a new country. The Russian Federation was a new country, relatively new, and had just got back on its feet and was, like we said, has extended a hands of friendship towards the US, towards Europe, wanted to join NATO, wanted to join the EU, and they went, "Fuck you. We're going to get you."
Yeah.
So you wonder why we're in the position we are today. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or why Russia is doing what it's doing today. And what is it doing? Nothing. It's all, again, it's the continuation of this attack on Russia that has been going on for 25 years, almost more.
Yeah. Yeah, they keep starting fires. Russia has to keep putting them out. And every time it puts them out, it's flipped in the international narrative to, oh, this justifies punitive measures, more sanctions. And it gets tighter and tighter. Now, of course, they want to go sanctions squared, which is totally strangle Russia. We'll see to what extent they're going to do it. And the grand strategy here, there's petabytes and petabytes of bullshit in the West about what Putin's intentions are, which can be summed up as he's trying to recreate the Soviet Union, right, or the Russian Empire. He needs more land, more. He's just an aggressive. He wants to expand, right?
Yeah. Which is,
he has stated numerous times what his grand strategy is. It's this: I want to get 100 years straight of stability, of no war, of no revolution in and around Russia. If I can get that, we're going to hit the ground running. We're going to develop. All of this, like you say, all of it is preemptive to a long-term goal of not letting Russia develop.
Of not having any country that could challenge America. Not admitting or accepting any country that even... Obviously, you don't wait until they get to the point where they can challenge you.
Yes, so all of this is done with a view to 5 decades hence.
Thwarting them in advance. But of course, they haven't been able to thwart Russia, especially from a military point of view. So this is why we have the level of hysteria right now, where they have to attack it via black propaganda and black...
It's completely inane. The Western propagandists get to say some true things about Russia. They mock the crap out of how poor the place is, how backward parts of its military still are, or whatever, how hungry its troops are, and they're not serious. But of course, they give away their disbelief of their own bullshit because they are terrified of Russian military potential. But the true part of what they're saying is that Russia is poor, relatively.
Yeah.
Medvedev, in a speech recently, is still Russia's prime minister. No, he's not. He's now a retired elder statesman. He's not the prime minister. He was asked, well, what is the main threat to Russia right now? And, he's expected to give something serious about the war. And he says Russia's biggest problem is poverty. Its biggest national focus, ideally, would be on alleviating poverty, on getting people up into the middle class, developing education infrastructure. And put that with what Putin says, just give us the time and the space to grow.
No, you won't. You're not allowed time and space.
And that's not allowed. We're talking
in fact, the fact that Russia says that exposes a weak point, and that's where we're going to poke.
Yeah.
We mentioned there what Russia has done, what's been accused of, how it's been demonized, and that demonization process is instrumental in getting us to the point today where you have a lot of people on Twitter and on social media who are completely clueless, who are buying the mainstream narrative about evil Putin, the dictator who's trying to recreate the Soviet Union, blah blah blah. He's just an evil assassin. He's a killer, as Biden called him. That's been going on for a long time, and there's people on social media who are woke to the bullshit of the Western media, who excoriate them in terms of their lies and why they're no longer believed by anybody. But on this topic, Putin's evil. We need to do something about Putin. Putin's trying to invade Ukraine. It's bizarre, the inability to where they'll totally trash the Western media and call them a bunch of liars, rightfully so, and then flip around and just believe everything they say about Putin and Ukraine. And we mentioned
not all of them, though.
No,
right?
but there's a bunch of them.
Yeah.
And I'm citing a bunch of people who don't seem to be able to get it, who do get it in other areas, but for some reason have been mind programmed about Russia and Putin. And there's been a long process of that happening, bringing them to this point.
Yeah.
And when we mentioned some of them there in terms of the process, like you had what's his name, Litvinenko was the first little salvo in 2007, 2006-7. How polonium poisoning a Russian dissident in London, died of cancer as a result of Russian polonium poisoning, whatever. Again, probably a false flag. Then you jump forward. You have to jump forward to 2014, the coup in Ukraine.
Oh, just before that, Magnitsky.
Magnitsky, right? Okay. There's a few little things that kept it ticking over. Started to seed or to set the scene of demonizing Russia and Putin in particular. 2014, you had him accusing him. They staged a coup in Ukraine, and you accuse him of annexing Crimea and Donbass.
Just before that, there was a prelude to what would come next everywhere. They accused him of being anti-gay because of his anti-pedophile legislation.
Well, there's a whole pussy riot thing as well.
To 2014
right.
Olympics.
And there was a whole clamping down on dissidents.
There's one of the big one. Remember, he put the kibosh on their Go Massive plan for Syria in August 2013.
Yeah.
There was weapons hot. They were on the runway, and the last minute, the British decided to hold a vote and vote against.
Right.
After Washington said Obama pulled back. That's because Putin did something.
Right. We suspect, that something was going on behind the scenes there. Yeah. But so there's all these little events that have shaped the Western public perception of Putin and Russia as this evil empire and him as an evil dictator and stuff, and all of it lies. 2014, he annexed Crimea. He, funneled weapons to the breakaway republics of Luhansk and Donetsk.
We think no one's ever found evidence.
And then
of
that summer that happened, he killed my babies. He killed our babies and shooting down that plane.
And ISIS springs up.
Then it's into Syria. He's really pissing them off because he's doing the right thing. He's just joining them in their war on terror. You're not allowed to. All sorts of negative press about Putin, and we mentioned a few there, and then Skripal's more recently. But one in the middle of that, or maybe before or after, I don't know the exact date, but obviously stole our elections, right? Hacked our elections.
2016.
And people don't. That was a big one for America. If you just throw up the YouTube video there, because you've probably forgotten about this, but it kind of sums it up.
Oh, God, I remember this.
We have been attacked. We are at war. Imagine this movie script. A former KGB spy, angry at the collapse of his motherland, plots a course for revenge. Taking advantage of the chaos, he works his way up through the ranks of a post-Soviet Russia and becomes president. He establishes an authoritarian regime, then he sets his sights on his sworn enemy, the United States. And like the true KGB spy he is, he secretly uses cyber warfare to attack democracies around the world. Using social media to spread propaganda and false information, he convinces people in democratic societies to distrust their media, their political processes, even their neighbors. And he wins. Vladimir Putin is that spy, and this is no movie script. We need
Pause
our
there.
president to speak.
This is no
directly.
movie script. That's why it's being read by an actor.
Use banner.
What a freaking asshole. So that didn't age well. Yeah, Putin convinced people in America to distrust their media. Yeah, because Americans have no other reason to distrust their media at all. Like, it's all about Putin. Like, but yeah, he goes on, obviously, blah 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 blah, and it's all about the Putin stole our election, hacked our election stuff. You know, we're at war. This is a war. We need to respond as if it's a war. And Morgan Freeman, come on. Obviously, he's just a stupid Hollywood actor. So what does he know? In fact, he did a video afterwards, and somebody asked him about it, and he said, "I was just asked to do it, and I did it." And he
Shameless.
said, "Do you believe it, though?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I don't say stuff I don't believe. But anyway, I can't talk about politics. Ask me about my movie." It's a joke, like, you know. But so
Shameless.
this is how, you know, people forget how they got to where we are today. You know what I mean? It's been a long process of acclimatizing the Western mind to this idea that Putin is a dictator and all that stuff that's being said right now, and none of it's true. It's a childish bullshit version of what's actually happened, and so many people believe it because it's easier, because it's simple, one line, small words, but it's simply
But
not true.
it also shields them from realizing the actual evil in the world, you know.
Yeah,
For Americans, obviously, it's the nature of their government and their, quote, way of life, which they're always citing. This is all to protect our way of life. Well, the atrocities you indirectly support to support that way of life, if you knew them, you would, you know, pull your eyes out. And you had a conscience, of course.
Yeah, yeah.
You'd run from the room screaming. You'd be... It shields them from that horror. It's a weird, but it's effective psychological strategy, psyop. You don't just give them rainbows and unicorns. You give them that too, but you also actually beat the crap out of their minds every day with CNN version, movie script version of an evil world.
yeah. Narrated by an actor.
Very clever, very carefully choreographed, Plato's Cave type stuff. When there is actually a serious issue to consider, there are real atrocities. There are ethnic cleansing incidents, but
Yeah.
they get inoculated against seeing the actual horror by instead shedding crocodile tears at the pretend horrors or the warped versions of them. The one that bleaches any involvement of my team, you know,
Yeah, for sure.
the
yeah.
winning team.
Yeah. Yeah, and the elites, like, I mean, the elites are so detached from reality at this point. It's the Karl Rove thing, you know. That quote attributed to Karl Rove about how here's some.
We're an empire now.
Yeah, what did he say? We're an empire now, and when we act, we create our own reality. And while you're studying that reality judiciously, as you will, we'll act again, creating new realities. Well, that's what they're doing right now. You know, it's a constructed reality right now that Russia is planning to attack and invade Ukraine, and that's the reality they're creating. And they're able to do that because they have control over the media and control over the information sphere. You know, that's a big part of it, having control of the information sphere, because if you can project your version of reality, you can project it into the minds of people, and then that becomes that reality in a certain sense, because people act on it, you know, or at least they don't react against it, you know, they believe that's the case, you know. But and it's also, you know, it's a fiction as well that NATO's purpose of containing the Soviet Union back then has changed with the appearance of the Russian Federation, the fall of the Soviet Union, and the appearance of the Russian Federation. That NATO's purpose is no longer to contain Russia. I mean, it obviously has not changed. It just segued straight into containing the Russian Federation. And what is containing the Russian Federation involves what they're doing, what they have been doing since 1990, which is progressively to expand closer and closer to Russia's borders in order to attempt to create a situation where they can, like I think I mentioned this in previous shows, where they can get a kind of a military option of a kind of first strike capability, that where they could effectively win a war. They could have some kind of a, and they don't even have to go there necessarily, but they have to get the military apparatus in place, where Russia knows very well that they're defeated militarily without a shot being fired, and then you get them to back down. You get them to do what you do what we tell you to do. Now that you know and we know that if you don't, there's
Yeah.
going to be military consequences, and they're real.
Yeah, war is almost it is the tip of the spear, as the saying goes. But the real achievement is regime change.
Yeah.
And I don't just mean it's not as simple as roughly as they've actually executed it around the world in the last 20 years, where you instigate trouble in a country. In fact, ideally, you squeeze the people deliberately so that they are motivated to rise up and overthrow the regime. But it's not just about getting rid of Putin. It's not just about getting rid of the United Russia Party. They want psychological collapse. I have wondered this from time to time myself. Like, if I was a Russian, I'd be asking, is it worth all of this? Like, we could have developed a lot quicker by now. Could we not have? Well, theoretically, could we not have, if we just accepted Pax Americana?
Mm-hmm.
They want to bring them to the point of it's just full access, like in Western Europe, you know. And you see, Western Europeans would argue, well, life's not bad here, you know. Yeah, there's a lot we don't like. There's a lot of new ideological stuff, obviously, at the moment that we don't like.
Mm-hmm.
There's protests, you know. Lord knows there's enough grounds for revolutionary, you know, feeling all over the West at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, with COVID, that's, you know, sparked it as well. But on the whole, people are not about to overthrow any oppressors in the West because they have it good.
Yeah.
So they want to bring the Russian people, or at least their elites, and they'll follow, the people will follow after that, to the point of psychological collapse. For God's sake, will you just submit?
Mm-hmm.
Why do you, it's like,
Why do you keep fighting?
why do you resist Neo? You know?
Yeah, yeah.
And there's something in the Russian, it's not just, maybe Putin's key to it, but he's not just Putin, obviously. Because like I say, regime change wouldn't be enough. There's something in the Russian people that just goes, because I choose to.
Yeah, but that
won't.
Gets, but that gets down to, and it's seen in the West. Like you talk about people having it good and having it easy, you know, living high in the hog in the West and stuff. But that only goes so far in terms of keeping people content. You know what I mean? And maybe there's something in the Russian population coming from relatively recently a more agrarian, more real life, you know, more practical, down to earth experience of reality, let's say, in terms of where a majority of the population work in real jobs, work at the coalface type thing, you know.
Yeah.
Whereas in the West, you have a lot of people who have been, like you were saying, raised up into the middle classes. But a lot of the middle classes today, what that means is these people who live lives where they don't actually have much contact with actual reality. They
And
have
thus
all
meaning.
Yeah, and that's where it comes. You know,
Maybe the Russians are hungrier for meaning
right,
than
because
they are for iPhones.
because they're closer to it. They have it. It's closer in their history. You know what I mean? It's part of their genetics. You know what I mean? In a certain sense, where our family histories were, and the cultural norms and beliefs and understandings are passed on that convey a value for more mundane, kind of almost like hard work. You know, you get into Jordan Peterson stuff here, pick up your burden. You know, it's meaning, it's hard work and overcoming obstacles that provides meaning in life. If you elevate a whole population way up to the point where they have no longer any contact with that, you know what I mean? You might start getting a lot of disgruntled citizens. You know what I mean? But probably it'll take a while, and those people will enjoy that kind of middle management in terms of the human social structure. You know, they're in the middle where they don't have to get their hands dirty and a lot of things. They'll be happy with that. But the problem is that as that kind of, if you get corruption in government, or if you get people down lower, let's say who work menial jobs or who are farmers or whatever, who are getting the shitty end of the stick, let's say, or getting a raw deal in terms of, you know, jobs and economy and, you know, salaries and all that kind of stuff. Those are the people who'll get out and protest. And that's what we're seeing in Canada. It's like the people, we wonder why more Canadians weren't out protesting in Canada, you know. But I think the majority of the people who were protesting were people who were from, let's say, the lower end of the social scale. but they see, coming from that lower end of the social scale, they're able to see the corruption in a certain sense, or they see that they're not living as well, or they're being negatively impacted by the current system, whereas where the middle class are happy with and the ones at the top are you know, in the elite are very detached from reality and stuff. They're kind of like Karl Rove's kind of reality creators. We can do whatever we want type thing. But the people at the coalface are like, you know, we're not so happy here anymore, you know. And then you see whenever they protest about whatever it is, whatever's bothering them, what happens in Canada, you know. Okay, they get to have their trucker protest for a few weeks, but then it's in with the cops and the battens and the horses and the emergency powers and trample them and put them down, you know what I mean?
Do you want to talk about that next?
Yeah.
There's one other thing. Putin also said something with Lukashenko present yesterday. Again, cool hand Luke. Sanctions will be imposed in any case.
Yeah.
So he's expecting it. Whether they have a reason today, for example, in connection with events in Ukraine, or if there's no such reason, it will be found, because the goal is different. In this case, the goal is to slow down the development of Russia and Belarus.
Yeah.
So he knows, yeah, it's just,
Well, that's what.
this just wraps up what we just said
Yeah.
in a paragraph.
Yeah. And it's always been that.
Yeah.
For the past 25 years, that's been the goal all along. They've seen Russia as, and again, maybe we haven't defined it precisely, and maybe we can't define it precisely, but for some reason, back in the 90s, America, maybe it was just because that was their old enemy, and we need an enemy, so let's just keep Russia. But I think it's more than that. They perceived something different in the Russian mindset, that they realized they were never going to be able to force to submit. They were never going to be able to bring it into our sphere of our frame, our sphere of influence, right?
There was a greater risk of, if it came into the sphere, including into our institutions,
infecting.
of it changing the nature of the institutions.
Yeah, both, yeah.
They'd want equal voting rights, and then, whoa, hold on. It's the IMF. We run the IMF, or WTO, or NATO.
Mm-hmm.
Just before we go, did you see that the German Chancellor went to the Kremlin last week? And he also got the long table treatment.
Did he? Yeah.
It was the same thing as Macron. He wouldn't take the PCR test. So
Hysteria, like.
the Telegraph ran this piece. It's bonkers. They don't have any information. They were speculating as to why it was the case. We know that this isn't standard for everyone who visits the Kremlin, because Bolsonaro of Brazil,
got a handshake,
a hug, and business deals done. Apparently, it's the biggest importer of Russian meat or something, or vice versa. Anyway, let's look at this one. This is the British Telegraph, of course. Where else? Trying to explain why, quote, why world leaders don't trust Vladimir Putin with their DNA. And it basically speculates that
from ancestry checks to futuristic, up a little bit. From ancestry checks to futuristic bioweapons, the West aren't taking any risks when it comes to the Russian president.
Sorry, I was distracted by the image there of Putin peeking through peeking through
DNA
the lines of your DNA, and I was wondering if maybe like Russia will be accused of like hacking our DNA soon. And
somebody should do a coffee table book of the best, the worst graphics the Western media have come up with
bizarre,
for their media, for their reports over the years.
It's so hysterical. Like, it's such yellow bullshit journalism. It blows my mind. Like, and how people don't see they're being manipulated by that nonsense.
The claim is that Putin could develop a specific bioweapon that would target the leader.
Look at the first line there. It's kind of interesting. It could have been a scene from the frostiest days of the Cold War. You mean we're still in the Cold War? Well, yeah.
Yeah, we're back in because Putin, right?
Yeah.
The playbook and all that. Whose playbook is it again?
Yeah, who knows?
It's such bullshit. Anyway, it goes on to say that, there's a couple of layers of analysis here. One is, obviously, they're stupid. They're suggesting that Putin would use it to create a weapon to target the leaders.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. Okay.
Well, look,
the other one is...
French diplomatic sources later admitted the decision was, in fact, motivated by fears about what the Russian state might do with his saliva. With Macron's saliva.
Well, in Macron's case, it was interesting. They were worried, they said, that Putin would use it to find out who his ancestors were, who he's related to. Is there someone in Macron's recent past that he's anxious that never be revealed or something?
Quite possibly. Scroll down. Is there a picture of the German Chancellor? No. Oh, yeah.
No, that's Macron.
That's Macron, yeah. But the German Chancellor got the same treatment. Very frosty. Frosty, Cold War-y. Cold War, frostiness, eternal winter.
It's so farcical. As if, like, you can't find out
Yeah.
if someone's trying to hide someone in their ancestry. I mean, the world is awash, as the article points out, in 23andMe DNA. These are American firms that are pushing this big time.
Yeah.
Oh, just find out who your ancestors are.
Yeah.
And tens of millions of people are basically giving their information to the CIA.
But couldn't they have got a piece of hair? Like, surely Macron shed a piece of hair there.
In the article, it explains that,
Did he wear a hairnet?
get this,
Or some hairspray?
Prince Harry, who no longer has the full suite of state protection because he's, carted off to California, nevertheless has a special security detail that follows him to wipe tables, to pull bed sheets of any surface he's touched outside his home. Why? Because somebody might, for example, the article speculates, take a hair of his, do a DNA test, and find out that his real father is that Hewitt guy.
Oh, my God.
They have these full-time details, swiping stuff for hairs.
But why? If it's just for that reason, then that's an admission that his father
something
is
is dodgy.
that other guy, not Prince Charles. Yeah.
So
I don't know. Yeah. I think a big problem in all of this is, complete, and the elites, and it's filtered down into society where they're basically very detached. I was thinking recently there about a few different things. That idea of the elites being very detached, removed from the lives and the concerns of ordinary people, and then being in this bubble where they really believe they create reality. They're all powerful. They can create a reality for the population. The population will just have to go along with it, have to try and figure it out. But we create reality as we go along.
And that they're that important.
Yeah.
That their DNA might be.
But yeah, and it kind of made me think about, because I think that's very true. You know what I mean? Like, you look at Trudeau, just disappearing off for 2 weeks while this, and then coming back full of piss and vinegar, basically. No conscience, no sense that he would ever meet any of the truckers. It's just like, declare emergency, declare a state of emergency, and basically, send in the police and beat heads, and that he thinks that that's fine to do, and he can get away with it, and you see that across the board, like, and obviously with the Russia thing and the way these people are in the US, politicians in the US and in Europe are acting towards Russia, making shit up all over the place and believing it, apparently. So their complete detachment from reality, effectively, and how that, and I thought about it in terms of like postmodernism that came in the scene. I mean, I know it's been around for a long time, but really burst onto the scene 5 or 6 years ago, and the whole transgenderism thing, and how because transgenderism is an idea that you can be whatever you want, right? And postmodernism is a kind of social constructionism, right, where everything's a construct, and it ties into this. It has elements of that idea of basically life, myself, and life, and everything. None of it's real, and it can be whatever I want it to be.
Because it's me.
Yeah. And the elites acting in that way, and it filtering down into society and producing these kind of postmodernist social constructionism ideas that are taken up by a lot of people. And then you have Facebook turning itself into meta and saying that everybody's going to live in the metaverse, which is like a literal detachment from reality.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like across the board. Like, there seems to be a theme there that's pervading society, particularly in the West, where it's like just people are being encouraged to withdraw from reality and just live in a make-believe world, basically.
Yeah.
And you can't do that for very long before reality, actual reality, starts to intrude. But again, you've got a small, at least maybe a minority percentage of the population who don't have the luxury of being able to do that, have to live, like I said before, I kind of at the coalface, and do menial jobs or do difficult jobs. And they're the ones who are like this is all bullshit.
A small fringe minority, Joe?
Not a fringe minority, but a minority of the population. I don't know if it's a minority. Maybe when I say minority, I mean maybe 30-40%. I don't know what the actual data is. I know there's a lot of them. You know, you saw it in Trump in the another example of the different perception and different attitude towards life and maybe different contact with real life among a population. You saw it with the Trump election, where the map, you know, of the red and blue states, all of the blue, all of the Hillary Clinton, all of the Hillary voters across the map in the US were all in cities, in big cities. Well, these people are all living in this middle management and social hierarchy place where they have an interaction that the jobs they do affect society, but not directly. And all of the red states are all in the countryside, all rural.
Yeah. And
people who work and get their hands dirty.
Yeah, and that country,
in one way or another,
that country they live in, while it's still nominally the United States of America, they actually live in the global archipelago of globalized city-states.
Right.
Just surrounded by hinterlands of red.
Right.
You know, the rabble.
Yeah.
They no longer have attachment to... They have more attachment when a terror attack or some other atrocity happens in one of the other islands of this global archipelago. You know, the lights go up, they change their avatars. We're all Italy now. There's been a terror attack in Rome. Oh my God, yeah, I'm connected with the world. I can totally empathize with your situation. But then they have no clue there's a mass uprising against whatever, austerity in Italy by the working class, or COVID lockdowns by the working class. It's like
look down
dirty
your nose at it.
rabble.
Yeah.
You know, send in the police. Oh my God.
Yeah.
So they very much have... It's faux. It's not. It's a thin. When actual reality intervenes and there's catastrophe, you know, they won't be empathizing with their fellow globalized people.
No,
there's
sure,
a thin veneer of. They're trying to recreate bonds. They're not just smashing all bonds into little atomized units. They're trying to meld those bonds into these new sort of one world faux ones. You know?
Well, it's virtue signaling, right? That's what they get out of it effectively, is by empathizing in that way, supposedly, with all the oppressed people around the world via Twitter or something, and Instagramming about it or something, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, that's all self-focused. They don't really care about those other people, you know. And the guy who's working on a farm or working on mechanics or whatever, he doesn't have time to be on YouTube, or doesn't have time to be paying attention to what's going on around the world because he's working 12 hours a day or working 10 hours a day or something, you know.
Yeah.
And also people who work, like farmers, for example, you know, they'll notice maybe bad things going on with the weather, you know, problems with crop yield and that kind of stuff, or just being outside where some
prices.
And pricing, and they'll notice it first, and they'll complain about it, and they might protest about it. They'll get out in the streets, whereas the people in there, kind of like again, the middle management in the social hierarchy, who are detached from it all, don't never get their hands dirty. They'll say, well, no, I looked at my weather app on my phone and it didn't say there was anything wrong with the weather, and I go from my air-conditioned apartment to my air-conditioned car to an air-conditioned office and back home. I don't really have any contact with the weather outside, so I just check it on the weather app, and it says it's fine and it feels fine to me.
Yeah.
You know, but
Bubble reality.
yeah, that's what we're dealing with.
So yeah, unfortunately, the Canadian protest is coming to an end.
Yeah,
You have our full sympathy, but you got 4 weeks out of it. 1 week of, you know, driving to the capital, and 3 weeks there, and now breaking it up.
Yeah.
I speculated last week that Trudeau came under pressure. Matt Taibbi has a specific claim. He's guessing that Trudeau came out of hiding and went full, let's end this occupation, full Hitler, after a phone call
pink Hitler
from Biden. Because they issued a joint statement, and he went through it, Taibbi, and it makes sense. It was kind of like, it was the first iteration of calling it an illegal occupation. And this has to end now, and trade between Canada and the US is down 30%, and you know, chop, that's enough, guys, go home. So he thinks that the White House, to quote his own terms, put Trudeau's balls in a vice. And that was when he began the first measures, which have culminated in the last 2 days in the police saying, okay, guys, go home.
going and beating heads.
Beating heads, targeting journalists. Not in the only reason we have any footage is largely because Rebel News and people live streaming from the event. Mainstream's like, we didn't see anything, you know. So they're not there. they're trying to not have, but there's tons of footage online, of course. I don't know if we want to show any of it, but tear gas has been used. I'm afraid you're probably going to get the treatment that France got in 2018-19. And a key element of it wasn't just beating heads every weekend when the Yellow Vests gathered in hundreds of cities. A key element of it was information blockade. So there was some reporting that continued in France, but that was dialed down. They were called Nazis, misogynist, racist, etc. So there was bit of black propaganda against them. But the biggest chunk of that information warfare was to shut down international reporting on it. So just everyone go quiet, and they'll try and do that in Canada, contain it information-wise.
Yeah. COVID news. What's going on with COVID?
Oh, wait. Can I talk about Freeland first?
Go on.
Because this connects us to our first topic, Ukraine. Let's play it first so everyone knows who she is. This is the Deputy Prime Minister of Canada. She's quite a character, Chrystia Freeland. This is her announcing the end of the, quote, illegal occupation last week.
So you're confirming that accounts have been frozen, both personal and corporate, but you're not releasing the information. And the actual follow-up is, I'm just wondering whether the bank accounts will be targeted of individuals who donated to the Give, Send, Go and the GoFundMe campaigns. Are they considered designated people under the Emergencies Act, meaning that their credit cards could be cut and financial services are targeting them as well?
Okay, so the names of both individuals and entities, as well as crypto wallets, have been shared by the RCMP with financial institutions, and accounts have been frozen, and more accounts will be frozen. Crowdfunding platforms and payment service providers have started the registration process with FinTrack. In terms of the specifics on whose accounts are being frozen, you now have the regulations. The financial service providers have those regulations as well, and they, working with law enforcement, will be making the operational decisions.
So that's a new element. I didn't hear of that in France during their Yellow Vest issues. Just going in and freezing bank accounts. What kind of effects it having? Well, we know that people's names have been doxed by helpful activists, probably with RCMP help and other official help, I would guess. And it's led to people who've made like one-off donations of like $100. Civil servants have been fired from their jobs, mid-level people. I don't know what effect that's having like on. It could just be bluff, and they've only done it to targeted numbers of specific people who they think are organizing it, or accounts that have been used to organize supplies to the protesters. Are they going to do it en masse and like block the accounts of like 50, 100,000 people from buying food? They would be so freaking dumb if they do that, because of course now they really have nothing else to lose, right? And they're going to go, it's just going to ramp things up. I doubt it. I think it's more targeted. We'll see. But that woman, she's obviously well known to Canadians for being Trudeau's number 2, but she has one hell of a history. She was central to organizing the Lima Group, which was set up in 2018 to try and get Juan Guaido recognized as the legitimate president of Venezuela, which completely failed, although it took some time to fail because they really pushed it for a year. She was central to that. But another thing that brings us to Ukraine is she is regularly in contact with the Ukrainian government. Let me see if I can. So as recent. Okay. The Globe and Mail, Canada's main top newspaper, has reported that Chrystia Freeland called Zelensky to demand that he block legal proceedings against the former president, Poroshenko, who was accused of treason. This was indeed lifted. Poroshenko returned to the country.
Yep.
And you can more or less coordinate the timing of Zelensky's change. Remember, he was voted in a landslide election to bring peace to Ukraine and end the situation in the Donbass. Once Poroshenko is back, he's massively outflanked on the nationalist right. And she just completely changes his tone. That is direct interference from this woman in Ukraine. She probably wasn't the only figure doing it.
No.
But interfering in other countries. This, of course, she made similar statements in the last couple of weeks about interference in Canada, insinuating but never actually accusing people of causing the protest from without, you know.
Russia did it. Putin did it.
Okay, that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah. Yeah. So, well, I don't know. Maybe we'll have to wait and see. Is it going to be another damp squib? I mean, supposedly, like we said, now that the Beijing Olympics are over, Winter Olympics are over, it's time for a jolly good war. Somehow Russia's going to invade, but be provoked to invade. As you said, it's planned all along. We'll have to see. But like you said earlier on, it's they're trying to put Russia in a bind basically, and it'll be interesting to see if they're able to get out of it or not. But on just go to the Twitter link on COVID. The only thing I have to say about COVID is that, well, I'll let Bill what's his name? Bill Gates. I'll let Bill Gates say it for you.
To kick off, actually, and get a bit of a scene setter from Mr. Gates, because this is, I know, a topic that you've spoken on again and again. You were ahead of the curve prior to the beginning of this pandemic. Where would you assess where we are today in beating COVID-19?
Well, sadly, the virus itself, particularly the variant called Omicron, is a type of vaccine. That is, it creates both B-cell and T-cell immunity, and it's done a better job of getting out to the world population than we have with vaccines. If you do surveys
you suck.
in countries,
you can stop it there.
Well over
That's the main point. So sadly,
nature's better than me.
Sadly, nature, is better than our experimental vaccines. Of course, he would, to try and make some sense of his point there. His point is that sadly the virus itself got out. I mean, it's not a very good point anyway, but the virus got out and created immunity in a lot of people. But in the process, a lot of people died. Of course, it doesn't really hold up because a lot of people didn't die of Omicron. In fact, hardly anybody died of Omicron. I'd say they're in it's a vanishingly small number of people have died from Omicron. So what he should be saying there is, and the really pertinent word there is sadly, he should be saying happily, this virus mutated through natural exposure to people's immune systems, mutated into, as all viruses do, into a much more benign form, but in doing that, it created people who got infected with this much more benign form called Omicron have developed strong immunity against all variants of SARS-CoV-2. So that's a really good thing. But no, according to Bill, it's sad. Sad that, I don't know why it's sad. He doesn't really explain it. I mean, I'm having to infer from the bit he says later that what he's trying to say is that I don't know what he's trying to say.
There will be less vaccines to sell.
Well, no, what he's trying to, sadly, is the use of the word sadly is that people had to die before this happened. But again, detached from reality, I don't know. He's not a good poster boy. Like I don't know.
He's invested in far more than COVID-19 because
He's invested in pharmaceutical companies.
exactly, and their vaccines were going to change the world. They were going to save the world from all pandemics now and ever, and improve the world. I mean, they were going to. Well, last week Moderna announced they've cured HIV with a vaccine.
I know. Cured it? They didn't cure it yet because
Well, presumably that's where they're going to go with it because they have announced that they have a new vaccine for HIV. So, and the flu.
Well,
Bill Gates is all about the flu. We're going to end the flu with
what
a
are they
vaccine.
putting out a vaccine for HIV for? All of a sudden. Has the experience with COVID and developing mRNA vaccines, has that just opened their eyes to the great potential within mRNA vaccines, experimental vaccines, that can wipe out all sorts of diseases, including HIV? It just so happens that HIV came along. That has no relevance to the fact that, you know, Nobel Prize winning scientists have said that, well, at least one of them, and other scientists have said that there's a HIV segment on the spike protein in of SARS-CoV-2. There's a HIV segment of the HIV virus on the spike protein. Is that got anything to do with this HIV talk now? Just throw up that tweet there because, I mean, it's not really gone. It seems to be a subtle thing that they're putting out there, but there's an example. The government of Saskatchewan in Canada, HIV self-tests are now available free of charge at 23 locations. You can do the test yourself and get your results in 1 minute at a time and location that is convenient for you.
It's weird. And it's weird that it's happened globally all at once.
There's something weird about that. Like HIV just jumps on the scene, you know, and it's like suddenly HIV is a thing, not just for everybody now, you know. Why? I don't know. Because Moderna has a vaccine for it, maybe. So you need to create the concern and fear among people that they might suddenly get HIV. You know, especially older people. You know, because them oldies, you know what they get up to, and
Well, this is the thing.
where do you get HIV from?
Are they suggesting that this
There's a
is
new variant.
not sexually transmitted?
A new variant, a free-floating, a respiratory HIV,
It's airborne.
airborne.
Or there's something else going on.
There's always something else going on.
Because viruses are complex, right?
Yep.
I think, oh God, I'm speculating. I think that they found that HIV is like really prevalent in the population. It's nothing to do with your past behavior. There's some other forms of contamination.
You think it is? It has been. I mean, before the mRNA vaccines or since the mRNA vaccines?
I don't know. We can't really. What science can you rely on here?
The dodgy one.
The dodgy one.
The Queen got COVID.
I saw that.
She's triple jabbed, but then most people are getting COVID or triple jabbed.
Well, yeah, it's normal now.
There she is. God bless her. She's 700 years old, and she got COVID. No, she's 95, I think, at least 95. And but you know, again, didn't get COVID, tested positive for it, and has a sniffle. I don't think that used to be front page news, which it is today. That the Queen has the sniffles, but apparently it is now. Anyway, and you wonder why people are losing faith and don't trust the media anymore? No, you don't wonder why, Neil. As Morgan Freeman told you, it was Putin. If you distrust the mainstream media in the West, Putin did it. God save us from people like, from Hollywood actors, first and foremost. From them ever opining on anything at all.
Yeah.
Other than how awesome their new movie is.
The part I'm looking forward to is a whole troupe of Hollywood celebrities, along with Ariana Grande, doing a pop song where everyone has AIDS.
Well, they've done it for COVID, right?
They've done it for COVID, yeah.
Her and James Corbyn.
Team
or whatever
America
it is.
World Police
Yeah.
in the early 2000s spoofed, you know, AIDS awareness campaigns. Everyone has AIDS.
Yeah.
AIDS. Well, actually kind of there. They've done it for COVID. Now they just need to supplement this
Different, yeah.
campaign by doing an AIDS song, you know?
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It's going to get to the point where we're not going to have to say anything. We're just, hopefully, I hope we can get to the point where we just put up news articles about something about on some topic, some, you know, topic of the day, or the statements of our overlords, you know, our leaders, and we just put them up in a sequence, and we just look at them, and we don't say anything. You just put them in a series, you know, and you don't have to say anything. You just, you know, it's just our jaws can just drop.
If this Canadian government measure for dealing with protests sets a precedent, then yeah, everyone will be watching their bank accounts, because what you say could reduce your social credit score, formally or informally, whatever.
Yeah.
It will have a chilling effect. That direction, if that's where it keeps going, yeah, we won't be able to say anything. Not only will we not be able to say anything, you know the Defiant L's Twitter account?
Yeah.
It was temporarily blanked offline this week, and they reinstated it. All this account does is post before and after statements by people in power, people with influence, celebrities, or where they say one thing on one issue and say the absolute opposite on another, exposing the complete inconsistency of their point, right? That's all he did. Put them side by side, tweet. No extra comment on it. Just what they said now, what they said before.
Yeah, that's enough. Yeah. You really don't have to talk
And he
much
got, I don't know who it is, got censored.
Wow.
He came back, but I think appealed successfully. But
Wait, I
it was
wonder what the
offline.
justification for that was, what their narrative for censoring that was.
I don't know.
Well, apparently the press secretary Dmitry Peskov, the presidential press secretary Dmitry Peskov, noted that, has said that the head of state Vladimir Putin does not pay attention to the statements of Western countries about the dates of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think we should all be like Putin and not pay any attention to the dates from Western statements about the dates of a Russian invasion. Because, yeah, I think we should have stopped doing that quite a long time ago. So, yeah.
The protests in Canada aren't over. They're still going. There was a big one in Calgary yesterday and Quebec. They're still there in Ottawa. But we'll see what happens. I'm afraid it's going to be it's going to be kind of a digital purge, maybe with tear gas, maybe with flashbangs. People in the Anglophone world don't know what happened in France to crush the yellow vest. You know, about a dozen people were killed accidentally, but still by police flashbangs. About 400 people lost eyes or limbs from police shooting flashbangs at them. The cities were just saturated in tear gas, week in, week out.
Yeah.
And then, so it's shocking to them what they're seeing, but France is like, hold my beer, you know, 4 years ago, this happened to us.
Yeah, on a much bigger scale as well. Just throw up masks there, just out of pure interest. Just, you know, stick another knife in there, throw up masks.jpg. This is from the CDC recently. It's on the website. We'll put a link in the description. People who reported always wearing a mask in indoor public settings were less likely to test positive for COVID-19 than people who didn't. So masks really work, right? Except see that little asterisk at the end of the word didn't? You have to really look for it. Do you see it?
Yeah, I see it, yeah.
At the end of the word didn't. But then you have to look even harder down at the
find-
bottom.
Oh, that's too small.
It says, this asterisk says, or the description of what the asterisk means at the bottom is not statistically significant.
So what's the 83% then?
Not statistically significant, 83%. So people who reported always wearing a mask in indoor public settings were less likely to test positive for COVID-19 than people who didn't, in a not statistically significant way, i.e. meh.
It's mind-boggling. There were mainstream reports in like June 2020 saying the masks were useless.
Yeah.
And
Fauci.
government statements, British government
himself.
Fauci himself,
Everybody.
British government statements said at the time, look,
It's theatre.
we know they probably don't work.
It's
to
face
stop them,
decoration.
but it's important that everyone,
It's to remind people.
psychologically
Yeah,
get
psychological.
behind. And,
Yeah.
It was in print. It was in print.
Yep. But it's gone way past the point where a lot of people can actually think for themselves and can navigate their way through that. So it doesn't matter. They can say one thing one day and something totally different the next day, or totally opposite the next day, and it doesn't matter. It's left for people like us to suffer through that kind of bullshit and have to witness it. Most people just don't pay any attention.
I
Somebody's
don't
gotta do
know,
it.
I don't know what I'd do if I had kids in school and they had to.
Yeah.
I wouldn't stand for it. They'd have to do something.
Yeah.
A lot of them, don't. They're trying to stop it, or they're taking their kids out, homeschooling or whatever, which brings its own headaches. Oh,
Yeah. So predictions. By this time next week, when we're talking again, are we going to be talking about a Russian invasion or a Ukrainian invasion or any kind of invasion are we going to be in the same position next week as we are this week vis-a-vis Ukraine, i.e.
I think
are we going to have another week of incessant bullshit with nothing actually happening?
no. Well, the thing that will change is that the UKs will start shelling more often. I think the purpose of all this is to bait Russia into doing something.
Right.
Although that's not the be-all and end-all. Like I said, the current top of the page on the Telegraph is, let's just sanction Russia anyway. And Putin said to Lukashenko, they're going to sanction us anyway. So maybe it's not important that the UKs act more to bait Russia. It's going to happen anyway. The next thing will be...
They have to have a justification for the sanctions, though, do you think, no?
There has to be something to mark it. Maybe an atrocity. And Russia will go, you did that. And they'll say, oh, look, you see, Russia said we did, you did that. And sanctions.
Yeah, okay. So we'll wait and see, is what you're
Yeah.
saying.
I'm afraid so.
Which is usually the case. Yeah. Have you got anything else to talk about? Because I'm all out of topics. I'm done.
Done. I'm done.
You're done too? Okay.
Oh, Jean-Luc Brunel was found dead in his jail cell
Yeah.
in Paris yesterday.
Yeah.
This is a guy who...
He's the procurer of...
Yeah, he started a modeling agency for teens with Jeffrey Epstein's money.
Yeah.
Oh, and the video cameras were turned off.
Yeah. That happens to the worst of us, thankfully. Yeah. I don't know. Epstein didn't kill himself, and neither did that guy. But whatever. That's the world we live in. Anyway, yeah. So we'll leave it there for this week, folks. Thanks for watching on whatever platform you're watching it on. And if you can, give us a like or a subscribe, depending again where you're watching it. We'll be back next week with another show on whatever has been going on since then. And until then, we hope you have a safe week and keep our country.
See you next time, everyone. Thanks for watching.
See ya.
Bye.
Can't stop the signal, Mel.